It all began with a single missing girl, a police lieutenant's suspicious ledger, and a house run by two respectable sisters. What investigators uncovered in the basement would shock the Russian Empire and stain the history of criminology forever. What would you do if you discovered that behind the elegant facade of one of your city's most famous houses lurked a true factory of death? How would you feel, knowing that dozens of young women who came to your city seeking a better life found only agonizing deaths at the hands of those who had promised them protection and prosperity? In the autumn of 1904, as golden leaves carpeted the streets of Krasnodar and a cool Kuban breeze drifted through the city blocks, no one could have imagined that events were unfolding inside a refined mansion on Krasnaya Street that would shock the entire Russian Empire and become one of the darkest chapters in the history of criminal investigation. It all began with a routine missing person report. On September 19, 1904, a second guild merchant, Andrei Petrovich, appeared at the police station of Yekaterinov. Krasnodar was then called to report the disappearance of his 22-year-old niece, Maria Sokolova, who had arrived from Rostov-on-Don 2 weeks earlier, looking for work. According to Sokolov, Maria was last seen entering the house of the Romanov sisters, a well-known establishment that officially offered lodging for single women seeking employment, as well as a sewing workshop where many boarders earned temporary wages. Police Lieutenant Nikolai Ivanovich Dubrovin, assigned to the case, treated it perfunctorily. The Romanov sisters' house, owned by Elisaveta and Alexandra Romanov with no relation to the imperial family, enjoyed an impeccable reputation among city authorities. The sisters were known for their generous donations to charity, regular church attendance, and close ties with the municipal administration. Besides, disappearances of young women who had come to the city for work were not uncommon. Many simply moved on to other towns without notifying relatives. I remember the first time I saw that house. Dobrovin later wrote in his memoirs, a 3-story neoclassical mansion with columns at the entrance and a manicured garden. Nothing in its appearance hinted at the horror concealed within its walls. Elisabeta Romanova, the elder sister, received me in a spacious salon decorated with exquisite taste. She was a woman of about 40, impeccably mannered, with a cold beauty that, despite her age, still drew attention. She answered my questions calmly and confidently, showed me the guest register, where it was recorded that Maria Sokolova had indeed stayed from September 5th to Dose, after which she checked out, saying she had found a position at the city governor's residence and was moving there. Everything seemed in order, and I was ready to close the case if not for one oddity. What caught Dubrovin's professional eye was a discrepancy in the register. Maria's name was written in a different hand than the surrounding entries, and the ink looked fresher. On closer inspection, he noticed traces of an erased entry beneath the new one. Suspicion stirred. He decided to verify Maria's supposed employment with the governor. As expected, they knew nothing of a young woman from Rostov. Further inquiries showed that over the previous 3 years, more than 20 women who had stayed at the Romanov sisters' house had vanished without a trace. All were young, attractive, and most crucially lacked a wide circle of acquaintances in the city. Most had arrived from elsewhere in search of work. They were ideal victims. Their disappearances could pass unnoticed. And if someone did start looking, the sisters always had a ready explanation for a sudden departure. On September 27, 1904, after a week of careful surveillance, Dubrovin obtained a search warrant. The operation was carried out at dawn, while most residents were still asleep. What the police discovered exceeded their darkest expectations. A basement chamber, hidden behind a heavy iron door disguised as a bookcase in Elisaveta's private study, had been outfitted as a genuine torture room. The walls and floor were tiled for easy washing of blood. In the center stood a metal table with straps for restraining victims. Numerous tool scalpels, saws, forceps were neatly arranged on shelves, attesting to the owner's medical training. I served in the police for 23 years, Dubrovin wrote in his report, and I have never seen anything like this. This was not merely a place of killing. It was a well-organized laboratory of death. Every instrument had its place. Every procedure, judging by the records found, was meticulously documented. We were dealing not with ordinary murderers, but with people who had turned killing into a sort of science. Worse horrors lay ahead. Behind a second concealed door, investigators found another room plane with rows of glass containers. Inside, preserved in formalin, were human organs, hearts, kidneys, livers. Each container was labeled with the victim's name and the date of extraction. Some organs bore traces of surgical manipulation incisions, sutures, signs of injections with unknown substances, in a large cabinet with drawers. They found the victim's personal effects: clothing, jewelry, documents, letters, home carefully arranged and labeled like museum exhibits. Alexandra Romanov, the younger sister, was arrested on the spot. Elisaveta was absent later. It emerged she was at the governor's residence, discussing a charity gala for orphans. She was arrested there, causing a scandal among Yekaterinoder's high society. The first interrogations yielded nothing. Both sisters maintained silence. Only after 3 days in solitary confinement did Alexandra begin to speak. Air testimony taken down by court clerk Feofan Kuprianov formed the backbone of the indictment. "I am not a murderer," Alexandra insisted. "I am a scientist. My sister and I are continuing the great work of our father, Professor Romanov, who studied the limits of human endurance and the possibility of prolonging life. Every death in our house was a sacrifice on the altar of science. These women did not die in vain. Their organs, their tissues, their blood served a higher purpose: the search for the key to immortality." It emerged that the sisters' father, Viktor Stepanovich Romanov, had indeed been a physician. In 1880, he was expelled from the Imperial Medical Academy in St. Petersburg for unethical experiments on psychiatric patients. After the scandal, he moved to southern Russia, where he continued his research privately. He trained both daughters in medicine. "Father died in 1899, Alexandra said. "Before his death, he made us swear to continue his work. He was on the verge of a breakthrough. He significantly extended the lifespans of laboratory rats with injections of extracts from human liver. We swore to finish what he began." Archives found in the secret lab contained detailed notes on experiments, the effects of various chemical compounds on human organs, injections of tissue extracts from one victim into another to observe reactions. The sisters were particularly interested in the endocrine system. Many experiments focused on glands of internal secretion. "We created a special elixir," Alexandra boasted, "a combination of extracts from the thyroid, adrenal glands, and pituitary that, when taken regularly, substantially slows aging. Elisaveta has been taking it for 5 years. Does she look 43? Anyone would say. She's barely 30. Indeed, everyone who had seen Elisaveta remarked on her unusually youthful appearance. The city photographer, Mikhail Glusko, who took portraits of high society, testified, "I photographed Mrs. Romanova annual for the Charité Almanac. Strangely, in recent photos she looks even younger than in the earlier ones. I blamed lighting or cosmetics. Now I see the reason might be different." As the investigation progressed, more shocks followed. The sisters' house was not merely a place of murder and experimentation. It was cover for a broader operation. The Romanovs corresponded with like-minded scientists in other cities of the empire, exchanging results, tissue samples, even living subjects. Letters seized from Elisaveta's desks, some from Moscow, St. Petersburg, Kiev, and even Vienna and Berlin were written in a clinical style, laced with medical jargon and ciphers, leaving little doubt. There was an entire network of clandestine laboratories. "Dr. colleague," wrote someone signing himself, Dr. K. from Moscow. "I studied with interest your resultant experiment. No. 17. Particularly the response of hepatic tissue to the combined extract. In my practice, I observed similar effects when using tissues from younger subjects, 16 to 18 years. I recommend lowering the age threshold in subsequent trials. I await the promised elixir samples, sending you in return a preparation from the pituitary of subject K12. Another explosive aspect was the role of local authorities. How had the sisters operated so long, on such a scale, unnoticed? The answer proved simple and grim. They had not hidden at all. They had integrated themselves into the city's elite, using status and connections for cover. Elisaveta was a frequent guest at the governor's receptions, donated to charity, and funded a new cathedral bell tower. Alexandra, trained as a physician, offered free consultations at the city hospital, winning the goodwill of common folk. We had patrons in high places, Alexandra eventually admitted. Some knew of our work and secretly supported it, seeing in it a path to personal immortality. Others simply accepted generous payments to turn a blind eye. A list of these patrons, found in a safe in Elisaveta's bedroom, rocked the province's establishment. Senior officials, gendarmerie officers, prominent industrialists, even clergy, each name paired with sums or special services. Local newspapers initially covered the Romanov sisters' case in meticulous detail, but soon received unofficial instructions to reduce coverage. Word of the horrors in the basement nevertheless spread across the empire. The capital papers Novo Vremya and Reskoye Slovo sent special correspondents. The famed journalist Vladimir Gil, renowned for gritty reportage, conducted his own probe, publishing a series titled The Kuban Vampires. What occurred in Yekaterinodar, Gilyarovsky wrote, transcends common crime. It is a symptom of a society where, behind respectability and charity, unimaginable evil may flourish. The Romanov sisters are not merely killers. They are the spawn of a perverse philosophy that places so-called scientific progress above human life and morality. A medical examination partly corroborated Alexandra's claims about a youth elixir. Chemical analysis at Moscow University showed that the liquid found in Elisaveta's apartments contained extracts of human organs mixed with compounds, including small doses of arsenic, which in certain conditions can slow skin aging. We cannot assert long-term rejuvenating effects, the experts concluded, but short-term improvements in appearance are plausible, explaining Elisaveta's youth fulness. More revelations followed. The house also functioned as an elite brothel for select clients among high officials and wealthy industrialists. It was no ordinary house of tolerance, testified Medagafia Sidorova, who worked for the sisters over 2 years. The girls were especially young, beautiful, educated. Many came from other cities, thinking they'd been hired as companions or Then they were locked on the 3rd floor in luxurious rooms for clients. Some tried to flee or refused. Those were never seen again. Madame Elisaveta said they were sent to another city, but we servants suspected they were taken to the basement. Elisaveta's diary, found during the search, contained detailed records of clients, preferences, and sums paid. Besides certain names were the letters PM, potential material. Investigators inferred these were people the sisters planned to use in experiments. They didn't prey only on women, Sidorova added. Sometimes men were brought in drunk or drug-taken straight to the basement. I heard screams. Madame Alexandra called them medical procedures for the poor. The total number of victims was estimated at no fewer than 70, mostly women aged 16 to 30, plus about a dozen men. The exact count could not be established. Documents were destroyed before arrest, and, according to Alexandra, some remains were buried outside the city. Our work was not only for ourselves. Alexandra said during a final interrogation, certain persons in St. Petersburg financed us. They were interested not only in the youth elixir, but also in other developments means to alter consciousness and suppress will, matters of state. This line piqued investigators' interest. Bashirofi's further comment. I've already said too much. There are forces even justice should not trifle with. The case was tried not in open court, but by a special judicial commission convened by the Minister of Justice. Sessions were closed to public and press, fueling rumors that authorities sought to conceal the true scale of the crimes and the names of high-level patrons. The trial turned into a farce, wrote attorney Sergei Malushev in his diary after attending several sessions. Testimony implicating prominent figures was excluded. Key evidence mysteriously disappeared from storage. It seemed someone powerful was determined to keep the truth from leaving the courtroom. Despite efforts to bury the matter, the sisters were convicted officially of 3 murders, the only ones whose remains were conclusively identified. Both were sentenced to death by hanging. The sentence was never carried out. 3 days before the scheduled execution, on the night of December 7, 1904, a strange incident occurred in the Ekaterinoda prison. According to the official report, Elisaveta committed suicide by ingesting poison somehow smuggled into her cell. Alexandra was found dead the next morning. The prison doctor declared apoplexy stroke. Many doubted this version. The night guard, Ignat Procoro, later told relatives that men in military uniforms without insignia visited the prison, met with the warden, and were escorted to the sisters' cells. An hour later, they departed with several bulky "I'm sure the sisters didn't die," Prokhorov asserted. They were taken out that night. The bodies shown later belonged to other women. I'd seen Elisaveta up close. The corpse was at least 10 years older and had a scar on the left cheek. But Elisaveta never had. More oddities followed. Dobroven, the lead investigator, was reassigned to a remote Siberian garrison. Court clerk Kuprianov died suddenly of a heart attack. The case archive at the district court burned in a fire of unknown origin. The mansion on Krasnaya Street stood empty 4 years, until the city purchased and rebuilt it as a gymnasium. All basement rooms were bricked up during reconstruction. Locals avoided the building, claiming that at night they heard strange sounds, women's sobs and screams. In 1912, 8 years later, a scientific monograph, Endocrine Secrets of Longevity, was published in Berlin under the name Dr. Elizabeth Roman. The book scandalized medical circles with bold hypotheses about significantly extending human life via specific hormonal preparations. Most shocking was a chapter describing human experiments allegedly conducted in an eastern country. Copies reached Russia. Journalist Gilirovsky drew parallels between the author and Elisaveta Romanova. Authorities refused to comment. Soon censors confiscated all copies in Russia. By 1914, with the onset of the First World War, the story of the sisters faded amid larger tragedies. Revolution and civil war erased memory further. Archives destroyed or scattered. Only in the late 20th century, as researchers examined declassified documents, did the Kuban vampires resurface. Fragments of commission reports, personal letters, period newspapers enough to partially reconstruct events, though many details remain unclear. The sisters' fate is especially tantalizing. After their supposed prison deaths, there are accounts that a woman resembling Elisaveta worked from 1907 to 1912 at a closed institute in Berlin, conducting research similar to the basement experiments. An archival staff photograph from 1910 shows a woman whose features resemble Elis, though the image is too poor for certainty. Equally intriguing are reports about Alexandra, Memoirs of Russian Emigres, published in the Paris paper. Askaya Missile claimed that in 1915 a woman calling herself Alexandra Romanova appeared in Constantinople and opened a rejuvenation clinic popular with wealthy refugees. After a scandal over several patients' disappearances, the clinic closed and the owner vanished. I visited this Dr. Romanova in 1916. Recalled Princess Maria Gal. She offered a course of rejuvenating injections from some natural extracts. Something in her cold gaze frightened me. Primera refused. A month later, my friend Countess V, who agreed to the procedures, disappeared. Police searched the clinic and found nothing. Dr. Romanova said the Countess had gone to Europe. Later, I learned the story of the Ekaterinoda sisters and was struck by the resemblance. Such testimonies cannot be considered conclusive proof of survival. Perhaps they were coincidences or people exploiting a scandalous name. Yet their number and consistency across sources invite speculation. More troubling is the possibility that others continued their research. Similar methodologies appear in closed clinics in Germany and Austria in the 1920s. During World War II, Nazi doctors experimented on concentration camp prisoners, including attempts at rejuvenation using human organ extracts. There is documented continuity from early Russian experiments to later German research, argues medical historian Dmitry Volkov. Some German physicians knew Dr. Romanov's work. Some may even have trained in her Berlin laboratory. This does not prove the sisters' direct involvement in Nazi crimes, but their methods and philosophy arguably influenced that inhuman system. In Krasnodar itself, the sisters' tale morphed into urban legend. The mansion on Krasnaya Street was destroyed in World War II. An administrative building rose there in the 1950s. Employees complained of headaches, hallucinations, a sense of dread. Some claimed to see the spectral figure of a woman in early 20th century dress passing through walls. In 1976, while laying utilities nearby, workers discovered a sealed basement room absent from any plans. Inside were remnants of strange equipment and many glass vessels. Officially, it was called the remains of a pre-evolutionary apothecary laboratory. Rumors spread that the true laboratory of death had been found. Soon the room was filled with concrete by order of local authorities. The workers were reassigned across the city. My grandfather, Nikolai Stepanovich, was sent to help clear that basement, says Krasnodar local historian Igor Berezh. He hated speaking of it. But once after a drink he told me they found not only lab gear but human remains bones sealed in the walls. Men from Moscow in plain clothes ordered silence and took everything. The atmosphere was so oppressive workers had panic attacks and hallucinations. One swore he saw a woman in a white coat watching from a dark corner. When the flashlight swung toward her, she vanished. These might be written off as legends if not for one detail. In 2000, researchers studying declassified KGB archives found documents confirming that in 1976, a secret pre-revolutionary site was indeed discovered in Krasnodar. The materials were deemed so important they were sent to Moscow for a closed gerontology institute. Particular interest is attached to manuscripts presumed to belong to ER, containing formulas and methods for long-acting preparations. Read a report signed by Colonel Klee. Preliminary tests indicate potential efficacy. Further research recommended under maximum secrecy. What became of this work is unknown. After the USSR collapsed, many archives were resealed. Some documents were likely destroyed. Indirect evidence suggests research continued at least into the late 1980s. In 1984, a paper on hormonal regulation of aging processes appeared in a restricted medical journal. Questions of experimental gerontology, describing experiments remarkably similar to the sisters officially on animals, but with methodology and phrasing nearly identical to fragments from Elisaveta's notes. After that, the trail goes cold. Some experts suspect the work migrated to private hands in the 1990s. Exclusive anti-aging clinics sprang up in Russia and abroad, offering wealthy clients costly treatments. Officially, they used stem cells, hormones, and modern techniques, but rumors spoke of special procedures for select clients, rooted in older, darker knowledge. One coincidence concerns a Moscow clinic, Vzerezdiny Renaissance, opened in 2000 by Dr. Elena Romanova, who claimed descent from a family of physicians. In gerontology since the early 1900s, the clinic offered exclusive rejuvenation by ancestral formulas enhanced by modern tech, serving high officials, business magnates, and celebrities. It abruptly closed in 2007 after inspections triggered by an anonymous ethics complaint. The stated licensing violations seemed odd, given its clientele and connections. Soon after, a similar clinic, Renaissance, opened near Zurich under a Cypriot-registered owner. Many staff, including the chief physician, were from Russia. I worked as an administrator at Vzerezdiny in Moscow, then moved to the Swiss branch, says Natalia K. Name changed. In Moscow everything was official standard, very expensive. Procedures. In Switzerland, there were additional services for special clients, performed in a separate wing accessible to select staff only. I never entered it, but rumors spoke of special biological materials delivered from the developing world. The atmosphere grew so oppressive, I quit within 3 months. There is, of course, no hard proof linking modern anti-aging clinics to the Romanovs' experiments. Many researchers, however, believe the great work never truly ceased. It merely adapted. The dream of youth at others' expense is one of humanity's oldest dark fantasies, says psychologist Irenas, who studies serial killers. Vampire legends, witches bathing in virgin's blood, every culture has them. The Romanov sisters are one manifestation of this archetypal dream, dressed in pseudoscience. I wouldn't be surprised if it continues today in more sophisticated, technological forms. In 2010, a documentary, Cuban Vampires, premiere produced by a Krasnodar studio. The filmmakers interviewed historians, local scholars, and descendants of witnesses. They visited sites linked to the sisters, including the modern building on the mansion's former lot. Working on the film, we met coincidences and oddities, said director Andrei Kravchenko. Archive files that should have contained relevant materials were missing or under restoration. Some witnesses refused to speak on camera for fear of consequences. One consultant, historian Viktor Samilov, abruptly cut ties and emigrated to Canada a month later. Even after all these years, the story still felt dangerous. A highlight was an interview with an elderly woman, Olga Dubrovin, granddaughter of the very Lieutenant Dubrovin who broke the case. She said her grandfather, upon returning from Siberian exile after the revolution, left a sealed envelope to be opened only after his death. The letter reportedly claimed the sisters were only part of a vast network operating across Russia and abroad, funded by a secret organization with agents in the highest echelons of several European governments. He believed his exile was punishment for getting too close to the truth, and he was certain the sisters had not died in prison but were spirited abroad to continue their work. The letter's authenticity cannot be verified. Olga claimed the original was confiscated in a 1972 search by men identifying themselves as state security. The filmmakers relied only on her recollections. Another intriguing exhibit in the film was a 1937 photograph from an international gerontology congress in Berlin. Among the attendees was a woman strikingly similar to Elisaveta Romanova, though she should have been over 70. In the photo, she looked no older than 50. The back read, Doctora, specialist in endocrine regulation of aging Argentina. As with most survival evidence, it could be faked or misidentified. Yet the number and spread of such clues invite contemplation. Perhaps the story did not end in a Yekaterinoder cell in 1904. Historian Alexei Morozov considers it likely the sisters were indeed saved from execution and smuggled abroad by influential patrons. The real question is who they were and why. A globe-spanning secret society seems fanciful. Political interests are more plausible. The early 20th century saw the rise of modern intelligence services. Russian Okhrana, German intelligence, and the British Secret Service all showed interest in mind control methods, interrogation, drugs. Some documents suggest the Romanovs experimented in those directions. Perhaps they were rescued to continue such research. This theory finds indirect support in memoirs of General Spiridov, a security chief under the Tsar, who mentioned a special laboratory in the southern provinces developing special-purpose preparations for interrogating political offenders without naming the location, but matching the time and region of the sisters' activity. A Herman military attaché S. report from March 1946, months before the arrest, speaks of promising medical research in the Kuban with potential military significance, recommending contact with the leaders for possible cooperation. As for the sisters' later years, the most credible scenario places them in Germany under military medical patronage. Then after Germany's defeat, moving to South America. In the archives of Argentina's immigration service, researcher Maria Santos of the University of Buenos Aires found documents for Elizabeth and Alexandra Romanov, physicians from Russia arriving in Buenos Aires in 1919 from Spain, granted residency by influential sponsors. Records indicate they opened a private clinic in the suburbs specializing in rejuvenation procedures, operating until the mid-1950s and closing upon the owner's death. By dates, Elisaveta would have been around 90 and Alexandra 8, yet local papers described them as youthful ladies appearing no older than 60. Were the Argentine Romanovs the same sisters from Yek? There is no direct proof yet. The shared names, profession, specialization, and unusual youthfulness strain coincidence. Another find. Argentine police files from 2001 on a series of disappearances of young women in the district where the Romanov clinic once stood at at least 30 missing between 1920 and 1955. Investigations failed, but reports noted that many were last seen heading toward the rejuvenation clinic for wealthy ladies. The modus operandi matches, says criminologist Vitor Leontiev. Same victim profile, same bait of work or treatment. Even if these Romanovs weren't the originals, they clearly followed the same scheme. After the sisters' deaths, their clinic was sold and converted into a sanatorium. According to locals, the basement was bricked up by order of authorities, and the medical archives seized by police. Its fate is unknown. In the 1960s, 70 Segundos, elite anti-aging clinics opened in Argentina, Chile, and Paraguay, founded by doctors claiming to be students of the great doctors Romanov. They shared not only a focus on rejuvenation, but also scandalous reputations, rumors of strange disappearances and unlawful experiments, routinely smothered by influential patrons. Today, the Romanov sisters saga remains one of the grimmest riddles in early 20th century Russian crime. The absence of key documents, contradictory testimony, uncanny coincidences, and inexplicable mishaps create the impression that someone has long worked to conceal the truth. Why does the story of the Kuban vampires still fascinate? Asks psychologist Maria Volkova. Because it touches our deepest fears and hopes. Fear of death and the desire for eternal youth unite all peoples and eras. The Romanovs show the dark side of that desire, the willingness of some to walk literally over corpses. The methods change with technology. The people do not. Science has since advanced enormously in understanding aging and extending healthy life. Genetics, stem cells, and regenerative medicine open new horizons. Yet the ethical questions remain as urgent as a century ago. No one today would kill people for a youth elixir, says gerontologist Andrei Sim. That's not only criminal, it's scientifically senseless. Still, the line between ethical and unethical research is contested. Cloning, genetic modification, embryonic cell experimentation all raise serious questions. The Romanov story stands as a grim reminder of what happens when scientific ambition eclipses moral principle. Some researchers argue the sisters' activities were not confined to medicine. Among their surviving papers are strange texts resembling mystical treatises, describing rituals and incantations, allegedly capable of prolonging life by absorbing the life force of others. Many view the Romanovs purely through the lens of criminal medicine and pseudoscience, says occult historian Valentina Macabre. But close reading shows they were interested not only in physiology, but in the metaphysical side of aging. Elisaveta's diary mentions a 1895 journey to Tibet and meetings with lamas who imparted secret knowledge. Other documents reference experiments transferring vital energy from one person to another via rituals. According to this hypothesis, their brutal experiments were not only attempts at a medical solution, but also modernized forms of ancient magical practice, and which lore reframed as science. Police reports note strange symbols carved into the lab's walls and floor. Experts at the time dismissed them as symptoms of derangement, but modern scholars recognize elements of cult signs linked to immortality. Another intriguing strand concerns their father, Viktor Stepanovich Romanov. Officially a doctor expelled for unethical experiments, newly found archival documents indicate that before medical school he spent time in India and Tibet, studying local healing methods and, possibly,